If you're not familiar with them, they help by making up definitions of various industry standards or technologies, or in some cases, even frameworks. And this is their definition of cybersecurity. And I just want to give you a moment to look at this. Now, while I do agree with some of what they said here, we definitely care about technologies and processes and practices. I really believe they're really leaving out some very key information on what cybersecurity is really about. So I would posture that what cybersecurity is really about is it's about measuring risk or managing your risk. And we understand I'm in the business of cybersecurity, so are some of the others that are here on the call with me hosting this. But for most of you, you consider it a cost center. So it doesn't make sense to deploy or employ cyber principles unless they are reducing your business risk. And that's truly what we're talking about here today, is how do we reduce your risk to your business? So let's start by chatting about a few of the cyber concerns. And I do apologize, in the cyber world, we just love our acronyms. SMBs, that's just small to medium-sized businesses. A lot of times in that space, there's a confusion about when we're talking cybersecurity, that we confuse it with information technology. Now, there are information technology components of cybersecurity, but it really is a business challenge or about managing your risk. And, we understand as well that, this may be a competing priority. Maybe you're in the business of providing utility service or healthcare services, or you may manufacture some device or equipment. And, that's your main priority, not cybersecurity. Sometimes it can be an afterthought. Shifting to remote workforce. There was a discussion this morning on one of the podcasts that I listened to about how that changes your risk posture and really your threat landscape. Maybe you don't have any cyber skills in your organization, so you do look outward to people like Apex Technology to help you with those things. Maybe you don't have a well thought out or actually written business continuity and disaster recovery plan. I mean, this goes well beyond just having a backup. And, inflation, the cost of everything has gone up, right? So, of course, there's an increased cost to respond and recover from an incident. There's global legislation. Did you realize that to you have to pay attention if you have customers that may be or clients that are in Europe? You have to worry about GDPR. If you have customers or clients that are in California, you have to worry about CCPRA and CCPA and a bunch of other acronyms that have to do with legislation regarding privacy concerns. What about cyber warfare? Have you thought about, we've moved into an age of cyber warfare. Look at Ukraine and Russia. So what happens when that conflict is over or that war is over? How do we repatriate those cyber warriors that are attacking one another? Do they all become bad guys now because that's the way they make their money? In an actual war, you're able to when you repatriate a soldier, you're able to take away and reclaim their weapons and their equipment. What are you going to do? Take away their keyboards? Probably not. Reputation damage. Reputation damage due to a cyber attack that's undeniable and unquestionable. I doubt many small to medium bit-sized businesses could take hits like stores like Home Depot or Lowe's or Target have taken when they have come under fire and have had cyber incidents happen. So some stats for you. A new ransomware attack does occur about every 11 seconds. There are some stats that say that ransomware is going down. I think it's really just changing. I don't think the number of the actual attacks are going down. They engage in tactics that we call quadruple extortion, where sometimes when people think of a ransom, they think about that encryption event. So sometimes these ransomware actors are even skipping that event. But when we're talking quadruple extortion, what's happening is they are encrypting your files, asking for a ransom to decrypt your files, then they have your data, right? So then they're saying, hey, great, either you did or you didn't pay the ransom, right? So now we're asking for more money, because if you don't give us more money, we're going to release your data. And threat actors have started doing something new. Typically, they would release all this data on the dark web, where people would have to use cryptocurrency to buy it. It was harder to get to effectively. However, now we're seeing threat actors like Conti who are releasing the data on the open internet. So that's an interesting twist there. And then the third thing they are doing is they are engaging in distributed denial of service attacks. So say you refuse to pay the first two ransoms, so then they begin attacking you so that your services aren't available either to your clients or maybe even to you, depending on what type of services those are that are being used. And then the fourth is they're even getting so bold as to pick up a phone and call your clients, because they know who they are now, right? And saying, hey, do you realize that this business has lost your data, and this is the data I have on you, and it's because I've attacked them, and they're not really, properly taking care of or taking seriously the protection of your data. Another reason that we have a lot of ransomware or phishing or whatever is on the dark web, which only requires a Tor client or Tor browser, that stands for the Onion Router, which anyone can download. You can use this to get to the dark web. You'll find all kinds of things for sale. You'll find ransomware as a service, phishing as a service, other things that we don't want to talk about or see as services, but we're going to concentrate on the cyber threats here. So these prolific and very financially positioned threat actors, what they like to do is, since they're already making money off their own efforts, this is something else that has changed in the landscape. So when I started my career, if you wanted to be a bad guy, you had to understand networks, you had to be a software developer, you had to know how to write malware. That's simply no longer the case. So now they're like, wow, we were making all this money by attacking ourselves. How much more money could we make if we offered this service where not only do we offer our ransomware or malware, phishing campaigns, whatever bad threat actor stuff you can think of, we're going to offer this to anyone who would like to buy it with some cryptocurrency. And we're going to offer help videos. We're going to offer customer support. We're going to offer payment processing. We're going to be a one-stop shop, so that, just like you and I would go and buy our Microsoft 365, a one-stop shop through Microsoft, they are now a one-stop shop to any wannabe bad guy or threat actor. And unfortunately, a little more bad news. I really don't like to concentrate on, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. That doesn't really motivate anyone. But these are statistics. These are simply facts. And if those facts do elicit an emotion, you really should take some time to think about them and reach out and talk to someone like Apex Technology about what you can do. So only 61% of data is typically restored after a ransom, not 100%, a little over 50. That is down from the previous year. And honestly, only about 4% of companies that are effective recover all of their data. And that is down significantly from the prior year. You can see these are some of the figures in US dollars, because you are a US crowd. This is the average approximate cost to rectify the impacts of ransomware. This doesn't take into account things like reputation damage or maybe some work stoppages of your own. I like to show this slide because this has a lot of interesting information on it. I just grabbed a couple snippets from the internet of different stories that had interest to me. I want you to note a couple in particular. I get a lot of questions about social media and the use of that, and also about things like OpenAI and ChatGPT. And the reason I have some of these on here is because I want you to notice first in the upper left-hand corner this very attractive face of a woman. This would also be the attractive face of a man. And people are using, or bad guys are using, chat bots and to build malware and to create fake girl bots or guy bots, whatever, and using them. And the way they use this is something we call pig butchering, where someone uses a dating app. They think they've established a relationship with them, and they think they're a real person, and they may engage in some activity that's against their better judgment, like maybe sending some inappropriate photos, or maybe just throughout conversation opening up and sharing some information that they wouldn't want everyone to know, or maybe information about their business or your business for that matter. And then once these threat actors have that sensitive information, what they'll do is they'll extort and say, hey, if you don't pay me, I am going to share this information with everybody. So that's what we call pig butchering. Other things to be aware of with OpenAI and ChatGPT. First of all, ChatGPT has been subject to breaches already. So if you're using it, you should be aware of that. You should be using multi-factor authentication, not just username and password, but like a passcode as well that comes through either a text message, which honestly isn't the best, but we're not here to talk about that, or or an authentication app or whatever. But you may have seen Samsung in the news. Not only do you have to worry about bad guys using ChatGPT, but you have to worry about your colleagues or your staff sharing proprietary information, because anything you put into this chat app belongs to them and can be used by them. But this changes the business email compromise landscape, because now threat actors can create, very targeted, very professional looking phishing emails that really can fool even a seasoned person. So you should be super careful, and you really shouldn't click on things in email unless you're expecting an email from somebody with an attachment. You shouldn't be clicking on attachments or clicking on links in emails at all. Next one, I have Facebook up here. You may ask, well, Facebook or Meta, that's a huge corporation. Why would I care about threats to them? Well, a lot of times we find that people use, because they want it to be simple, they'll use the same username and password, which is typically an email address for a username that they use for work, for using social media like Facebook or TikTok. Don't even get me started on TikTok, or Twitter or X or whatever it's called now. And what'll happen is these providers also get breached, and sometimes we also make it a little easy on them. Think about all those random Facebook quizzes that go around. Who are you giving that data to? And is that data being used by a bad actor in combination with something like ChatGPT to craft a really targeted phishing email or a spear phishing email against an executive that could really give them a foothold in your environment and allow them to do real damage? And then here I also have a couple of attacks that are local to you guys. Information on things that have happened in North Carolina. Move It gift that just keeps on giving. The Raleigh Housing Authority was shut down. These are all recent cyber attacks. There was a huge cyber attack that hit both Massachusetts and South Carolina. So just a little bit of information to show you I'm not just making this stuff up. And again, this article here is talking about that ransomware as a service or phishing as a service campaigns. So here at ConnectWise, we do have a security operations center. And if you don't know what that is super smart, highly credentialed and educated threat analysts that really know what they're looking at when they look at these tools that protect your environment and know a real attack from a fake one. So across the base of information that we have, these are the top 5 most active groups. You'll see CLOP on there. I just mentioned them earlier. They're the group that they're involved with the Move It breach and are the ones that are publishing a lot of the data just on the regular internet for anyone to access. And these are their TTPs, more acronyms: tactics, techniques, and procedures that the bad guys or threat actors use in their craft. And the reason I show you this list, things like phishing, command and scripting interpreters, Windows management instrumentation, data encrypted for impact. The reason I show you this is because when you partner with someone like Apex Tech, they understand this. And we understand this. So we are the ones who can give you the advice on how to protect yourself, because we understand what these bad guys are doing. And really, that's the first step in deciding, what do I need to do to protect myself? These are also screenshots actually from our Security Operations Center. This is a real threat. You can call it CACBot, Quackbot, whatever you'd like to call it. But what happens is people send OneNote attachments. And this is where maybe some security awareness training, or maybe just stopping and thinking before we just clickety click on everything would really prevent some of this malware. The issue here is people were sending OneNote attachments. When I say people, I mean bad guys. We're sending OneNote attachments. Well, if we stop and think about this for a moment, OneNote, just like SharePoint or Teams or whatever, is made for collaboration. You should never have to send a OneNote attachment to anyone. If you want to share information, you would do it directly from OneNote. Well, they're sending OneNote attachments, and these are captured from our SOC. These are real attacks. And what happens is they're trying to get you to click. So if you have something in DocuSign, don't click on an attachment. Go to your DocuSign account. Or if you don't have one, if you're not expecting to sign something or someone sends you, pick up the phone or send an email and say, hey, Bob, did you send me this DocuSign? Is this really something I need to look at? Just think before you click. And what happens is if someone clicks on one of these, and these all do look very realistic, they're going to get a malware infection and get encrypted and ransomed. Another attack I want to tell you about, and the reason I'm telling you about these is because these attacks are all different. Different protections help you, and multiple levels of protection are really your best defense and your best preventative measures, because not one technology is going to save you. This is an attack available on the dark web. It's a phishing as a service attack. One flavor is called Greatness, another flavor is called Evil Proxy. And I just want to walk through and show you how this works. And this does defeat multi-factor authentication. But think of it this way. Multi-factor authentication, think of it in protecting your home. In my neighborhood, I lock my doors. Not because I live in a bad place, but it's prudent in this day and age to lock our doors, right? If I lock my doors and my neighbor leaves their doors wide open and unlocked, and someone is casing the neighborhood to see where they can steal something, are they going to go to my house that's locked? Or are they going to take the path of least resistance? And MFA is like preventing people from taking the path of least resistance. So if a threat actor goes after you and you have MFA and another business doesn't have MFA, they're more likely to get into the business that doesn't have MFA or multi-factor authentication. So we have a user here and we have the website they want to go to. And it's office.com. And what has happened here is we call this an actor in the middle attack or a man in the middle attack. And that's why I've got this guy in a hoodie in the middle. And no, all hackers do not look like that, but it's funny. So yeah, he's the guy in the middle and he has a hoodie. So obviously he's the threat actor. And you'll notice he has his own site that he set up, a phishing website, office.com with multiple Fs, which again, if you're not paying attention and you're not mousing over that link, you may not notice that you're going to office.com with multiple Fs, right? Another thing I want you to notice is all the communications are encrypted, which means it's not in clear text and the bad guy can't see it. Just because you go to a website and it says HTTPS and they have a valid certificate, you don't get a bad certificate warning or an expired certificate warning, does not mean the site is safe. It just means it's encrypted. So what happens is user Bob gets an email. Poor Bob. I hope no one on this phone's name is Bob. But anyway, Bob gets an email from Jen, the CEO, and it says, or excuse me, Jen, the CISO in this case. And it says, Bob, your credentials have been compromised again, and you immediately need to go to office.com and reset your password. Or it could be a phishing email that looks like one of the ones I showed you that looks like it came from office.com. First thing you should do, if you get that email, you know how to log into office.com. Don't click the link. Go directly to the site. Worst case scenario, you've wasted a couple minutes changing your password. But if it is an attack, then this is the worst case scenario, and this is what can happen. So the reason we call this a man in the middle is it uses something we call a proxy server. Proxy server simply forwards information from one server to another. So the user inputs the name and password, it goes directly to the phishing site, and then the phishing site forwards that to the target website. So to the user, it appears, wow, I ended up in the right place. So Bob may have a moment of clarity or lucidity and go, oh my gosh, I just took security awareness training, or I just listened to a webinar and I'm not supposed to do this, but I'm in the right place, so I'm okay. So then the site prompts for MFA and he fills out the MFA. Remember, everything encrypted. What happens, this is where it goes bad. There's something called a session cookie that's created once that MFA is given. And that session cookie contains the keys to the kingdom. And this is where this bad guy now has all the information they need to be you. So that I want to say, this is all about people, process, and technology. When we have the combination of people, process, and technology, it's not all about tech. This is where we're safe. So what is that minimum acceptable technology? It's an incident response plan, multi-factor authentication, endpoint detection and response, a security information and event management system, backups, and cybersecurity insurance. One more thing I want to talk to you before I hand it over to my new friend Stephen is data responsibility. So this is what we call the data responsibility pie. I want you to notice it's a circle. It is not a line. Nobody is pointing fingers here, but you as the data owner ultimately own the liability for any breach that were to occur with your data. And the reason for that is because when we make these decisions and we make these roadmaps to help you, what we do is we tell you, we provide you risk insight and mitigation information, understanding from conversations and interactions with you what your business objectives are, and you make the decisions on what budget you are going to use for protecting your data. The IT team will deploy those solutions, and as I said, information security or cybersecurity, we will give you the information you need to make those educated decisions, because everyone doesn't look, every business does not have the same business objectives, nor do they have the same risk tolerance. It's different for everyone. Bottom line, what risk level are you willing to accept to protect your most valuable assets? And here to talk more about how you can protect those assets is my friend Stephen Agnew, and I will hand it over to him.
Great. Thank you, I think. I mean, nothing has made me want to unplug my computer more than what you just shared. So thank you. Let me get this queued up here. All right. Rob, can you see the screen?
Yep, looks good.
Okay. Yeah, that was a lot of information, and anytime I'm a part of one of these, or I'm in y'all's seat and I hear the conversation and hear what the presenter's saying, it's you learn something new, and it's just terrifying. I don't know how you're supposed to keep track of all that information and things and do your job at the same time. So where does cyber insurance fit into all of this? Let's do a deep dive here. Well, as deep of a dive as we can in 20 minutes here. What I've found is that most people end up having a false sense of security in terms of the technology protections they have in place, or they think they have in place, the security technologies. And after listening to Natalie, I don't know how you can fully feel confident in those systems. And so that's where insurance comes in. I always tell folks, that along the pathway somewhere, there's going to be a point of failure, whether that point of failure is technological or whether that point of failure is human related. At some point along the pathway, it's going to happen. And most people think, you either have this false sense of security in the systems they have in place, or they just think that they're not a target. And that's actually a question I'm going to have for Natalie at the end, in addition to other questions you folks may have. Is this sense that, well, I'm just, Jane Doe or John Doe, and I've got my small business, and, I'm not really a target, and so no one's really coming after me. And what we've seen through claims is that's just not the case. Is that we're all targets. There's either pitfalls out there for us to step into, or they're proactively coming after us. And it's so easy for them now more than ever, with the bad actors, with the technology tools they have in place, to kind of do this sort of broader attack on the web. So with the vigilance those guys have, it leaves us with our own set of vigilance that we have to do. And one of the tools in the toolbox, of course, is insurance. And when we think about cyber insurance policies, I dump things into these three buckets. We've got, and most of the policy forms read the same way, but we've got incident response coverage. That's for things like forensic IT, that's for legal, if we've got a situation where we're having to respond because there's been some personal identifiable information that's been leaked, and we've got breach notifications. We have to interact with legal as we navigate those waters. Notification cost, we've got PR cost. If we've got some sort of crisis event, crisis management, we're going to have to interact with PR. Then the insurance policy, we've got the first and third party coverages. First party coverages, cyber extortion, ransomware is probably what we're most familiar with, and what we probably see seemingly on a daily basis these days is the phishing attacks that end up resulting in ransomware and locking up our files. The business interruption is an interesting one that not a lot of people think about or consider in a cyber claim event. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later if I can get to some claim examples. But this is a very important coverage of the policy, because inevitably, if your files get locked up and you're down and unable to work for some period of time, we have all these costs that we sort of know that would be associated with a claim. Things like unlocking the files. How do we secure and buy Bitcoin to then pay to unencrypt the files? And we've got the data restoration costs to rebuild things if we can rebuild all of them. But during all of that, we may be unable to work, or we're working at half speed. And we've got employees that we have to pay, we have vendors, we've got bills we have to pay. So this business interruption piece of the policy can end up, and in terms of the claim, be a significant portion of the claim dollars paid out. So that's the business interruption piece there. System failure, data restoration, which we talked about. There's the third party coverages, things like privacy liability, network security, PCI, payment processing, and media liability. And here on the next slide, this kind of, I'm not going to go through every single one here, but this gives a little bit more of a detailed look at some of these and the first and third party coverages here. So it's a broad policy, and I find that these are all bundled together, and usually there's only a few important coverages for most businesses out there. If you're a professional services firm and you don't do a lot of payment processing, that part of the policy is not going to be as important to you, if at all. But they bundle it up this way, and the coverage is there. So it's important to kind of understand how your policy works and how to interact with that in the event of a claim, and what coverage. Usually when there's a claim, multiple coverages are being triggered during that, like the business interruption alongside the cyber extortion, for example, and then of course the forensic investigation. So it's important to understand this and understand what your policy can pay for in the event that you do have a claim. In addition, we've got cybercrime, which is in addition to ransomware attacks, is probably the second most frequent claim trigger that I see. There's social engineering. Sometimes people call it fraudulent instruction or cyber deception. That's things like, employee X emails the HR department and says that they are updating and changing their bank account information for their direct deposit. Well, that's the bad actor that's kind of slid into and is acting as if they're the employee. It looks like it came from the employee, and they're deceptively trying to change the routing information for that direct deposit. Funds transfer fraud, for wiring money. I've got a claim example of this. This was actually one of my first claims, was a funds transfer fraud claim, as I've been writing cyber insurance. And that's again a bad actor that is acting as though they are maybe a vendor of yours, and here's an invoice, we've changed our bank account routing information, please send updated information. And that's a very common one I'm seeing these days with folks that deal with wiring and transferring money. They often will monitor the flow and know kind of where that is going from and to. Computer crime, that's unauthorized entry of data into your computer system by someone other than you. Telecom fraud, don't see this as much, but it's certainly out there, and we may see more of it with how sophisticated artificial intelligence and the iterations of it are coming along with voice cloning and the way these bots, they can just sort of set them up and let them go. I do anticipate that we may see more of that in the future. Invoice manipulation, push payment fraud, reverse social engineering. That sort of goes hand in hand with the funds transfer fraud. So that's a big bucket. That's a big claim trigger that we're seeing a lot of. And some of you probably have experienced this or seen it and caught it. And I'll say that your technological security systems through someone like Apex and ConnectWise, that's your first line of defense. Employee education, first line of defense. Those are some of the best risk management tools you can have in place. And it's when those things fail that you have the insurance and the confidence of the insurance policy there to come alongside you and help in those situations. So what's going on in the cyber insurance market these days? We went through an aggressive period, when cyber insurance first landed, it was dirt cheap. And very quickly, claims increased. And as a result, cyber insurance markets and their actuaries were scrambling to increase cost. I mean, we went through a period of years over years where it just doubled. And those were fun conversations that we got to have with our insureds. It's leveled off a little bit. We'll look at a slide here next that speaks to that. Underwriters now have a little bit more historical data. Actuaries are able to more accurately evaluate risks and price it appropriately. And of course, there's great concern over what we're all doing as business owners, how we're protecting our systems and our data. So this is some data here from CRC, which is a wholesale insurance market. Updated here most recently of April of 2023. We can see that monthly renewal prices have actually come down a little bit, and that's due in part to claims slowing. Again, we don't want to have a false sense of security here, like I talked about at the beginning. This is just a little bit of price correction. What I've been told, and Natalie may be able to speak to this a little bit at the end, is that a lot of these bad actors, which we all know come from other countries, like Russia, are a little preoccupied at the moment, and maybe their efforts are directed in other places, and that's contributed to some of the slowdown and the claims that we've seen. Some of it's just, the pendulum swung so far in one direction from a pricing standpoint that we're starting to see those level off, and we're not seeing the same double-digit increases that we saw for a while. So I guess the point there is this might be a good time if you don't already have cyber insurance, probably to secure a policy. And I think it's important to know that, you may not, cyber insurance may be completely optional for most of you. But I think it's important for you to look at your contracts. I'm starting to see it show up a lot more explicitly in insurance provisions and contracts and vendor agreements. But sometimes it's also hidden in confidentiality provisions of the contract where you're required to, maintain confidentiality and maintain any information you're getting from the other party in a certain manner and secure it in a certain way. So it's important to kind of know that as well and pay attention to what our contracts are telling us, because we don't want to find ourselves in a situation where we're in breach of our contracts. So what contributes to cost? Of course, we've got our risk profile and our cybersecurity protocols. What do we look like to the insurance company, and what controls do we have in place? And that's all captured in the content of the application, which we'll look at here shortly. Our revenue and employee count, those are things that are going to impact the pricing as our revenue and employee count increases, because that makes us either a higher target or we have more opportunities, more points of failure that are there to fall victim to. Of course, any past claims that we've had are going to obviously be factored into the rating. What's our industry? What are we in? Are we in healthcare, finance? Are we professional services firm? which leads into our data sensitivity and how many records do we have, and are we interacting with personal identifiable information. So the next few slides here, we're going to look at application and the questions that are asked on applications. These applications, help us understand the nuances of cyber insurance, and the application is a great place to start. They update it frequently, as you could hear from Natalie. Just the changes in this space are unlike anything I've seen in any other line of insurance. It's this cat and mouse game. Technology iterates incredibly fast, and it seems like it's just iterating faster and faster with the advent of artificial intelligence and how that can 10x the ability of some of these people to be able to to write code and some of these bad scripts that can go out there and go to work for them. So, the application is a good place to start in terms of it gives us some insights into what the insurance companies are seeing across a spectrum in terms of claims and critical risks. And their goal is just like ours, right? It's to minimize exposure and the threats, and the questions that they ask, they're not arbitrary. They certainly highlight what's crucial in the cybersecurity landscape. So let's look here at some of the questions they're asking. It's around communication security and system security. And admittedly, I mean, a lot of this stuff is over my head, these acronyms and the acronyms that Natalie was mentioning. That's why, in fact, a lot of my clients, a lot of my insureds get people like Apex to help fill out the application. What do we have? Look, hey, Apex, we work with you, and you guys control our system, but we don't even know exactly what we have here and how we're being protected. And it highlights an opportunity for conversation with your your managed IT provider, to talk about things that maybe you don't have that you might need. So lots of acronyms and lots of things here to fill out and know that you have in terms of multi-factor authentication is a big one. That has become a baseline now for almost every carrier to even qualify for coverage. If you don't have multi-factor authentication on your systems, for those that are remote connecting in, for your email systems, for most markets, it's a non-starter. And I imagine that in the not too distant future, that will be a requirement for every single market. We're close. There's only a few that I don't know of. And the few that do write it, they severely sublimit what they're going to pay out in terms of limits if you don't have it. So MFA, while it's not perfect, as Natalie showed, it's become a baseline in terms of protection. Let me go here to the next slide. Ransomware recovery. They want to know what your backup protocols are. What are you using Office 365? Do you have anti-phishing training, endpoint detection, things like that? And I want to make sure we leave time for questions here. So forgive me, but I'm going to gloss over some of these. Email security, unsurprisingly, is a huge threat vector. And so again, MFA to protect you guys, and email security, and anything you can do to shore that up, everything from employee training to the MFA. I'm not going to beat MFA over the head too much more, but you can get a sense here just how many times I've seen this pop up in terms of the application. It's important. Backups, so important. If I have time here, I'll share a claim example of a client who thought they had something that they didn't have in terms of backup and recovery. It is so important and can be such a great tool if we've got backups that we're confident in, that we know that we can get. If a cyber event happens, cybersecurity event happens, and we find ourselves testing that, how regularly it's backed up, is it stored off site? Rob, you'll have to help me here. I think there's a 3-2-1 sort of philosophy when it comes to that. 3 backups, 2 separate locations, one's off-site, I think is the 3-2-1, and that may itself be outdated. But it's important to have confidence in your backup system. And the age of the do-it-yourself the DIY when it comes to backups. I would not have confidence in that at all, and I don't think you should either. It's just a game you don't want to play with. You don't want to find yourself in a situation where you are having to test your insurance policy and how good your backups are. Again, a bunch of acronyms that I don't entirely understand, but questions that you're going to be asked on the application. You know, your antivirus, your DNS, your SOC, your System Operations Center. All things that you're going to be asked on your application. It doesn't mean necessarily that you're not going to qualify for coverage, but these do turn the dial on the premium that you'll end up paying. I get the question a lot in terms of how much insurance do I need, and that's such a subjective thing depending on the insurance or the industry that you're in and how many records that you're interacting with and PII. So where I usually direct people to, and I'm happy to share it, I don't have it here, but Chubb has a great calculator on their website. And maybe when we get to the Q&A, I'll dump it in the link in the Q&A. But it's a great, drop down menu. Here's the industry I'm in. Here's how many employees I have, revenue, that kind of thing, and it'll tell you, give you an idea, sort of benchmark you in terms of limit, what they see and what limit you should have. And of course, it's all a function of premium dollars as well. What are you willing to pay, and what can you afford? And last here, it's important to know that the application, like most insurances, does become part of the policy. So that's why a lot of my clients will interact with folks like Apex to help them fill the application out, because they want to make sure they're not either intentionally or unintentionally misrepresenting on the application. You don't want to give the insurance company any opportunity they can to decline a claim. Not that they would. The good ones are going to do what they can to find coverage in the policy, but we certainly don't want to leave the window open, so to speak, and give them the opportunity to do that. So I'll end here with 2 claims examples, then we'll open it up for Q&A, and I'll pass it back to Rob. I mentioned the funds transfer fraud, which was one of my first claims that I had. One of my large engineering firms had a sub-consulting engineering firm that they paid on a regular basis for work that they were subbing out to them. And they got an email from this sub-consultant from their email address, and it was on the sub-consultant's letterhead. It was to the accounting department of my insured that said, effective immediately, our bank account routing information has changed. And wouldn't you know it, my insured had a $52,000 invoice that was due to pay to them. So accounting department updates it. It was from someone they knew. It was a familiar email address, and it was on letterhead. So they paid the bill. 30 days goes by, and that sub-consultant says, hey, by the way, you haven't paid this. It's still due. And of course, they start peeling back the onion, and both of them realized what happened. And they both turned it into their cyber insurance. Fortunately, we had cyber insurance. They both turned it into their cyber insurance carrier. My insured's carrier paid. And fortunately, and because this is very rare, it doesn't always happen, but after the insurance company paid, my insured was able to work with their Bank of America, and they actually tracked it down and were able to get reimbursed by the bank in the full amount, and they ended up reimbursing the insurance company. Doesn't always happen that way, but that's a claim example that would actually be triggered on both parts if there's cyber insurance policies on both ends, for both the sub-consultant and my insured there. And the other claim that I have here that I'll close with, which was actually my first cyber claim, but it was one where there was no coverage in place. A client of mine who we had talked to for the past 2 years prior to this about getting cyber insurance in place, and they declined it each time. Ended up having a cyber claim. They, at the time, were backing up with some sort of online cloud backup they were pretty confident in. And they found out after they got attacked by ransomware the nitty gritty of the terms of service of that was not, hey, we're going to drop ship you a hard drive with your backup. It's, we're going to open up a small pipeline for you to download your files. Well, this is going to delay them. This is another engineering firm. This delayed some of their projects. They had to send employees home that couldn't work. That's the business interruption part of it. They had to pay the ransom. So they had to find a way to secure cryptocurrency to pay the ransom. They had to interact with their IT to shore up the systems and then re-download the files after they paid the ransom. So they ended up paying the ransom and re-downloading their files from, when they gave the keys, when the bad actor gave the keys to them, was taking forever, and it was choppy, and it was patchwork, and it was not complete. Like Natalie alluded to, they weren't able to recover all the files. The claim ended up, they paid out of pocket close to $70,000 when we put all these pieces together. This was about a 15-person firm. And the biggest cost of that was the business interruption, was they had to continue to pay. Their employees weren't able to bill hours during this time, but they continued to have to pay the W-2 employees what they were paying them. So, that just speaks to making sure you have the confidence in the systems that you have, and making sure you know what you have. And of course, to me, with my clients, cyber insurance is a non-negotiable. You got to have it today. You can't not have that as a piece of your insurance puzzle. So I'll close with that. I know we covered a lot in a short amount of time. And I will, Rob, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here and pass it over to you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Natalie. We'll open it up for questions here. We've got a couple in the Q&A so far, but if you have any more, please go ahead and post those. I'm going to start with a question that Steve actually asked at the very beginning of his presentation. He made the comment, how do you take care of all this stuff, security, backups, and still do your job? One answer to that is to call us at Apex, because that is our job to handle all that stuff for you so that you can concentrate on your business and help grow your revenue and keep your employees happy there. So that's one question. Another that we have here, this one is for Natalie. How do I know if I'm doing enough from a cybersecurity standpoint? I haven't had any issues yet.
Well, I would say it's a matter of time.
Right.
But honestly, what you should do is you should talk to Apex about risk. Have that risk discussion and figure out, they're the experts. They're going to understand what your business objectives are, because you're going to have that discussion with them, and they will tell you, this is your risk. And then you have to make a decision what level of risk you're willing to accept. And with that, they can create a roadmap on what you should do. And like I said in the presentation, it's not all about, I love the tech because I'm a techie nerd, right? It's not all about the tech. There's other things too. Cyber insurance isn't technical. Your incident response plan is critical and isn't technical. Security awareness, they can help you with all that and the tech, because you need a combination. You need what we call defense in depth to make sure that you're safe. And the other thing I do want to say, though, is don't ever let anyone tell you that if you do A, B, and C, you're 100% safe. There's no guarantees in life. We all know that. If it sounds too good to be true, it is. Run.
Right. Let's see. Actually, one more for Natalie. Can you explain briefly the difference between SOC and SIM?
Yes. So SIM, the Security Information and Event Management System, this is a piece of software that manages or monitors your infrastructure. And when I say infrastructure, I mean your whole network. It takes basically logs from everything. So your software as a service, like your Microsoft 365 or your Google Docs, whatever you use, your firewall, any of your workstations, it'll take logs from actually the endpoint detection and response, and it will allow the people, the SOC is the people, the Security Operations Center, who are highly skilled and trained, and at ConnectWise, they're extremely highly credentialed, and I mean super hard credentials, not, I'm a good test taker credentials, and we all know what those are, but GIAC credentials. They are going to look at this information that's in the SIM And the SIM will create alerts off of this information, and they will look at it and correlate that information and let you know if it's a real attack or if it's not. Some of the things a SIM can detect, like is mass exfiltration of data. Or one of the things a SIM can detect that a person would never see is if your email gets compromised, that business email compromised, typically what they'll do first, or one of the things they'll do is they will send email from you to other people to try to propagate the attack. But what they'll do is they'll clean up after themselves. So they'll send the emails, they'll create a rule to automatically move those to the trash and empty the trash. So you never see that activity unless you're lucky to log in at just the exact right moment. But a SIM can detect that kind of behavior and alert you to it. So impossible login, an impossible login. I'm here in Tampa, Florida. I log into my Microsoft Office 365 account from Tampa, Florida, and 5 minutes later, someone logs in from Russia. Obviously not me. There's no way, unless someone has a teleporter I don't know about, that I could get from here to Russia in 5 minutes. That's just a couple of examples.
Sure. Okay. One for Steve, employee awareness training. How important is that when it comes to insurance cost?
Well, that's a great question. And I would say it's a small dial. It impacts it a little bit. And that's certainly, some of the big buckets, of course, are MFA, our industry you're in. They are, have you had any claims, your revenue. All these other questions start to turn the dial a little bit in terms of debits and credits. Are we, good employee training? Do we have the right protections in place? Things like that. So I'd say obviously this turns the dial in a positive direction. It's not going to be a huge pendulum swing. And it may be one of those things in the future that becomes a requirement that they're going to have in order to even qualify. So I think it's a good risk management tool to avoid claims. And I think employee education, and Natalie and Rob can speak to the tools that are available for employee training and education a lot better than I can, but I know there's a lot out there. But that is so essential because, like I said, anytime the human element is involved, there's a point of failure there. And so I think that's something good that we should all be doing.
Yeah.
Yep.
We are the weakest link. So did you realize that 75% of breaches are, and by the way, breach is a legal term, breaches are caused by human error? 75%. And that's actually improving. The year before it was 82%.
It's amazing. Not surprising though, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think our the stuff that Natalie and Rob work on are trying to make it as dummy proof as possible to where, if we're not doing employee training, like, between MFA and all these security protocols, that even if you're not a well-trained employee that has the proper education, that all these sort of alarm bells and system tools are there as a tripwire and to prevent it. But I still think employee education is so important.
Right.
I think it's
Okay.
one of the most important.
Yeah.
And that kind of leads into, we'll take one more question here because I know we're starting to run out of time, but one more is, how important is employee training when it comes to your level of risk, i.e. human error correlation to your issue? I would say it's probably close to the most important at this point, right?
Oh yeah. 75%.
Yeah.
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 So, well, that's it on questions. We do have the drawing now for the AirPod Pro 2. So I don't know if I hope it's me. Yeah. I don't know if you're eligible. We'll see what we got here. Spinner on. Melinda Farthing. So Melinda, we will be in touch. We will get those AirPod Pro 2s over to you and reach out to you here later today. Do you see one more question that was asked in here? And I'll address that afterwards. I know we're running out of time, but there was one question in the chat. Let's see. We currently have cyber insurance. Since we had a ransom attack, should we reach out to Apex? Yes, we can absolutely help. Take a look at that. And actually, Jared is going to share some information here. Let me see if I can get him unmuted. Hey there, Jared?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Thanks, Natalie. Thanks, Steve, and thanks, Rob, for putting this together. I just wanted to comment real quick on a few things that just got said there about the SIM and the SOC that Natalie was talking about. Obviously, ConnectWise is our partner, so that specific SOC she's talking about is the solution that we leverage when we're providing those SOC and SIM solutions to our clients. That goes into effect as well with our SentinelOne, because we're procuring that and doing that through ConnectWise. So that same SOC is attached to SentinelOne, making it more of a managed EDR solution than just a standard EDR. The other thing I was going to say was our existing clients that are on here know this, but the other people on the webinar, we have what we call a QBR, quarterly business review process, that the account managers meet with our clients quarterly, and cybersecurity and compliance gets talked about every single quarter. So we're trying to create that roadmap for you and talk a little bit about your risk each quarter and what we can do to help protect you more. So just wanted to add that in there because we're trying to engage with our clients on those to help educate them.
You're on mute, Rob.
I agree, though, Rob. It was great.
You're on mute, Rob.
Thanks. You figured somebody would do that at some point. At least I made it through almost a whole hour without doing it.
Yeah.
But again, I know we've run over a little bit. Appreciate everybody joining us. If you have other questions and we weren't able to get to them, or if you weren't able to answer those or ask those, please feel free to reach out to myself or Jared or your account manager if you're already a client of Apex, and we'll be happy to help you. Appreciate you, Stephen and Natalie, joining us today and sharing your expertise. And look forward to hopefully doing this again soon. So thanks again, everyone, and we look forward to catching up with you soon.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Bye-bye.
See ya.